1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 1. Now there was a certain man. There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of Mount Ephraim. And his name was Elkanah. His name was Elkanah. Verse 2. And he had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other, Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and her daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept, and did not eat. Then said Elkanah her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am not I better to thee than 10 sons? So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli, the priest, sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow. She vowed a vow unto the Lord, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord. I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way, and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. And they rose up in the morning early, and worshipped before the Lord, and returned, and came to their house to Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come about after Hannah had conceived, that she bare a son. She bare a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of the Lord. And the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice. The man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah went not up, for she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. And Elkanah her husband said unto her, Do what seemeth thee good. Tarry until thou have weaned him. Only the Lord establish his word. So the woman abode and gave her son suck until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, with 3 bullocks, and 1 ephah of flour and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. And they slew a bullock, and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition. The Lord hath given me my petition that I asked him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshipped the Lord. He worshipped the Lord there. Chapter 2, verse 11. And Elkanah went to Ramah, to his house. And the child did minister unto the Lord before Eli, the priest. The child did minister unto the Lord before Eli, the priest. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. That is, they were worthless men. They were worthless men. They knew not the Lord. Verse 17, wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord. For men abhorred the offering of the Lord. But Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat and brought it to him from year to year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. And Eli blessed Elkanah. Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife and said, The Lord give thee seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to the Lord. And they went unto their own home. And the Lord visited Hannah, so that she conceived and bare 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the child Samuel grew before the Lord. The child Samuel grew before the Lord. Now Eli was very old, and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the woman that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said unto them, Why do ye such things? Why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. And the child Samuel grew on and was in favor both with the Lord and also with men. There came a man of God unto Eli, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord. Verse 33. All the increase of thine house shall die. All the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. And this shall be a sign unto thee, that shall come upon thy two sons, on Hophni and Phinehas. In one day they shall die, both of them. Chapter 3, verse 1. And the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli. And the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There was no open vision. And it came to pass at that time, when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see. And ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep, that the Lord called, Samuel. And he answered, Here am I. And he ran unto Eli and said, Here am I, for thou calledst me. And he said, I called not. Lie down again. Oh. I wonder if that person could please forgive me and take the baby to the lounge where you can hear. I called not. Lie down again. And he went and lay down. And the Lord called yet again. The Lord called yet again. Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And he answered, I called not, my son. lie down again. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. Neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go, lie down. And it shall be, if he call thee, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood and called, as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. And the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do a thing in Israel at which both the ears of every one that heareth it shall tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. And Samuel lay until the morning, and opened the doors of the house of the Lord. And Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. Then Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he answered, Here am I. And he said, What is the thing that the Lord has said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God do so to thee, and more also, if thou hide anything from me of all the things that he has said unto thee. And Samuel told him every whit. And he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seemeth him good. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again in Shiloh. For the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. The word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now, beloved, there are staggering revelations found in these passages of God's sacred word that we need to carefully consider in the light of the rest of the scriptures, especially the New Testament, here tonight. Firstly, we find that in the Old Testament, God tolerated men having more than one wife, again and again. But this does not condone polygamy. And never forget this now. As much as the Old Testament is God's divine sacred word to mankind, including us, it must always be viewed in the light of the New Testament to avoid heretical teachings. Unless it is viewed in the light of the New Testament, you preach heresy. And there are many movements that condone polygamy today, and there are millions, because they refuse and reject the New Testament teachings from Christ's mouth, and they are guilty. Don't tell me they don't know. You see, Jesus said it was not so from the beginning. But the devastating consequences and effect of the fall of man in Eden, it was so uncomprehendable to you and me, of man's fall and its effect on man, that God said he had to close his eyes upon so much in the Old Testament that he tolerated in godly people's lives. He winked his eye, he had to close his eyes. But the full revelation of God was revealed to mankind through Christ, which the entire Old Testament pointed to his coming. And Christ clearly taught that it is God's will for one man and one woman to be husband and wife. I have preached a sermon when I quoted over 200 verses that I memorized on marriage, the scriptures only. From the first verse in the Bible right through to the last, every single aspect put into three facets. And that sermon caused a lot of explosions in this world, because the church doesn't want those scriptures anymore. A lot of those scriptures anyway. Secondly, we see the staggering revelation in this passage, these passages of God's sacred word, that we must consider in the light of the New Testament carefully here tonight, or grieve God, or even dared having to read without doing such a thing. You commit sacrilege in the pulpit of God, preacher, Be careful. Be careful. The second thing, a staggering revelation from these passages. We see that it is possible for men to be in some form of service in the ordained religion of God, who are not saved, who are unconverted, unrepentant, and more so, who make themselves vile. There's no fear of God before their eyes. The sons of Belial, worthless men, recorded in the Bible, the servants of the Lord, in chapter 1. In Shiloh, before Jerusalem and the temple, Shiloh was where the ark was kept. Well, it's possible through circumstances to be in a position where you can be the servants of the Lord in the eyes of men, unsaved, unregenerate, and worse, filthy. They made themselves vile. They were so filthy, morally corrupt and indecent and depraved and filthy. It's possible. That's fearful to me. In movements across the world, in evangelical churches, you'll find men who are not saved. They knew not the Lord, who are vile and filthy and depraved, and who take advantage of their position for financial gain. They're not there for God or for souls, they're there for money. And boy, within moments you know who you're dealing with. If they're there for that, run, screaming. Don't hesitate in case you're swept up in their sensationalism and rubbish and perverted doctrines to get your money. No matter what truth they preach with it, run, or you'll be swallowed up. Yeah, it's possible. The Lord Jesus said in Matthew 7, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have cast out devils. And in thy name done many wonderful works. That's miracles. You know what staggers me is Christ didn't say no. You never saw devils being delivered, cast out in my name. He didn't say no, you never saw any true miracles. He didn't say that. That staggers me. That staggers me. Have we not done that? Have we not prophesied? Now, be careful of this word prophesied. Be careful of this word prophecy. Contextually, in the light of the entire Word of God, especially the New Testament. I'd better stand behind some people who can defend me for saying that. Luther said this. Zwingli, Calvin, Wesley perfected, almost word perfect, but he perfected doctrinal statements made by the great founders of the great reformers. All of them said this in its context when Christ said that word, prophecy. Have we not prophesied in thy name? It's speaking totally of preaching. Full stop. Have we not preached in thy name? Cast out devils in thy name. Done miracles, wonder works in thy name. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Oh, you say I'm getting angry? Well, I want you to try and think how differently Christ is going to say it before you judge me, if you have any iota of sensibility and conscience left. What staggers me is the word many. Many will say to me in that day. Now you go to all your Greek interlinear, you go to the great commentaries of our faith, Matthew, Henry, Mark, Adam Clark, etc. You will find that that word many literally means the masses, the most. It's the closest you'll come. The most who stand under the banner of Christianity. You see, this is eschatology in Matthew 24, Matthew 7, Luke 7. All these eschatology, passages of eschatology of what Christ said you will see just before his return. In the last days, every word he utters now is what will happen in the last days. And here he says, the most who stand under the banner of Christianity worldwide. He will say these words too. They will say these things. Where the crowds go, in the last days, men of itching ears, they will heap unto themselves teachers having itching ears, wanting sensationalism. But don't touch my sin, or you lose my seat and my money. I wonder what percentage of preachers throughout the world today and you see the word many goes on and many times. Because many false prophets shall rise, that's heretics, in the last days. They shall deceive many, same word, the masses. The masses in the last days, across the world, who sit under the banner of Christianity, with men who are sensationalizing, perform miracles and cast out devils, and preach so in such a way that they flock to them in their sensuality for entertainment. Oh, I wonder what percentage of today's preachers, unless you don't believe what Christ said is applicable or loving, for any preacher to remind us what Christ said. I wonder what percentage will cry those words with such fear you've never heard any human in your entire life in this world screaming in such last words, hope. And Christ will say, I never knew you. I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Well, be careful here. Preachers across the world, is this you? Is this you, God? Oh, there's still time. There's still time. Let everyone that nameth the name of Christ depart from iniquity. Don't name him, let alone preach for him. Don't go on. Seek God and mercy in desperation. Be careful about this now, preachers. In case this is the last time God will ever confront you in your life. Don't play the fool with God, sir. You don't know what you're doing in the light of eternity, and this book says, even to preachers, to most who preach in the last days, of which we are, among the preachers of the last days, you see. Then, thirdly, staggering revelations we find in these passages of God's sacred word, that we need to carefully consider in the light of the rest of the scriptures, especially the New Testament, outside of which we'll be heretical in our teachings if we don't. It's possible be godly and to fail God in raising your children? Drastically. We see this. Not to read about it, to warn about. These things were written for our admonition. These were written for warnings. The whole Old Testament is there for us, not to be buried dispensationally. Yes, we know the dispensation, but it's the Word of God. It's possible to be godly. Let me be honest. Eli was probably the godliest man alive at that time, until Samuel, who really was so godly. Who was more godly? Only God knows. But he was godly. Now this godly, God-fearing man failed God in the raising of his children. It's possible to be godly and to fail God in the way you raise your children. I preached a sermon 2 years ago, just scriptures. Didn't say another word outside of it. From one side of the Bible to the other. This God says about children, how we are to raise, how they can break us and destroy us, or make us, and the testimony of our home stand. Oh, they knew not the Lord. They were worthless. They were vile. But their father was a man of God. Now, be careful here. Eli will not be judged. God will not judge him for what happened to his sons. On earth, he confronted him in grief at his failure. But we need to look deeper here. The fathers shall not be judged for the sins of the children, and the sons will not be judged for the sins of their fathers. Every man shall be judged for his own sin. 3 times in the Old Testament. Listen, don't doubt this now. Eli will face no judgment. About God's judgment was wording to his heart right then of what he had done. But he was still a man of God who had done this. Now we need to think of that. Why would he do that? Why did he fail? I want to consider that carefully here. I believe it's possible for a man of God, a woman of God, to become so disillusioned, so crushed, so destroyed. A wicked son is the destruction of his father, Proverbs says. And in this context, a godly father. I believe he gave up hope at their wicked lives, their wicked choices, that he just cut himself off. There was no hope. He just stopped trying. He grieved as he heard of their wickedness. Of course you will. But there was no hope left in his heart. So he didn't carry on. He didn't try to any more influence them or rebuke them. So no one knows what age. The Bible doesn't tell us. Oh, little children can choose to smash down the testimony of a godly man in the pulpit. And can. Nonetheless, you see, I also see that he had this little boy put there into his hands, and Eli did a wonderful job raising that boy. This is the son he wanted. Samuel, my son. This is the son he had wanted from the beginning, that was deprived of him, denied him by the choice, the free will of his 2 evil sons who chose God knows what age to serve the devil and self and sin and defy God and have their consciences seared with a hot iron, unable to any more have any fear of God before their eyes. You see, he saw that little boy, and he poured himself out, and he did an incredible job raising that child as his own, to serve God and to serve God to reach the nation's hearts and ears, that no one would argue with Samuel, no one. He was so godly. Eli was a wonderful man of God who did a good job with the son that God gave him with his... But he lost hope. When does a father, a mother who are godly, cease to have responsibility in God's eyes toward it? And let me tell you, While there is hope, you discipline him. You do everything you can. I'm not going to all that. I have done that in sermons gone by that you can find on the internet. When he finally had to confront them, he had no option. The whole nation was becoming angry. Men were stumbling. Oh, they caused men to stumble. That men hated even coming to worship God, hated coming to Shiloh, hated offering sacrifices. These men had so perverted every truth there was, and they were so filthy, the ones that had to minister to them. No, they caused God's people to sin. Many of them did. And grieve God and everything God had ordained because of the wickedness of the men who were serving in the name of Christ as servants. No. When he finally rebuked them, because he had to, why do ye such things? I wonder how many fathers and mothers, godly fathers and mothers, have said that to their children who are wicked and chose to serve Satan and not the God of their father and mother. Why? Notwithstanding, they hearken not unto the voice of their father. Because the Lord would slay them. You see, there's a point of no return. There's a point God seals your choice. Now, we see this here, and we see this through the rest of the scriptures. Be careful, young people, be careful. You listen to the sermon, be careful. You think God doesn't come to a point where he sealed, he that being often reproved and hardeneth his neck shall be destroyed, and that without remedy. God warns, O seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Now is the acceptable time. Today is the day of salvation, if you will harden not your hearts. Don't blame God. Don't anyone blame God if a man chooses. Don't you dare think God gives up a man for no reason. So in the light of the rest of the scriptures, that's trash. You see, Pharaoh hardened his heart 6 times before God sealed his choice, and then God hardened Pharaoh's heart. We must take note of these verses. We mustn't blind our eyes to what God is saying to us, because he's speaking in these things were given to us as warnings and admonitions. Not to read about. There's nothing in this book that isn't God's heart to be revealed to us. From verse 1 to the end of the Old Testament to the book of Revelation, everything is divinely inspired and intended by God the Holy Ghost to use. It's not recorded history. Be careful here. Romans 1, staggering. Verse 4, 6 and 8. For this cause God gave them up. Even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind. To do those things was not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, envy, murder, all the wickedness. But you see, it was their choice, and there came a point God sealed their choice. Be careful here. Be careful here. This can happen to you. Don't think you may be so much as that those who have the amazing fortune from God and mercy and grace, as you're dying to still cry out to him and still be in heaven. When you just refuse, that doesn't happen to everybody. Actually, it happens to the minority, very few. Because of prayer, by the way. A holy obligation to parents' prayers. Listen, parents. We are never to cease to try to reach our ungodly children, even as you die. There must be hope. There must be a sense of responsibility and whatever. First of all, you might not be able to speak to them about God, but that doesn't mean you can't speak to God about them. And prayer, sir, brings a holy obligation from God. There is nothing in God to force the man to love him, to be saved. That is a personal choice, but God can turn their world upside down. And I said to a young girl going out into sin, one of the godliest mothers in the world. Her father had been one of the loveliest, most loved preachers in history of Africa. He died young, but when she was going out to sin, and I said to her, Anne, what is the Lord going to have to do to stop you, Anne, to go out and sin like this? He's going to have to do something, Anne. Look at your mother. One of the godliest, if not the godliest woman I know on earth. And multitudes would say the same of her. You think God looks at her prayers, her tears? Look at her face. As you go out now to sin, looking at her. What is God going to have to do? He's going to have to do something in holy obligation to answer this godly woman's prayers. What's he going to do, Anne? To stop you? A while later, they found her filled with cancer, aged 19 years old. Beautiful. I went to the hospital. She lay there, and she said, do you remember what you said to me? What is the Lord going to have to do? She stopped me. Well, Keith, this is what he had to do. Be careful if you've got God-fearing parents praying for you. Don't play the fool with God, young man, young lady. As you die, father, mother, try. I was with two boys whose father and mother were so godly, moderators of a great missionary society across Africa and preachers, but their two sons were so wicked. How the father stayed on, though his heart was broken and his heart crushed and his liberty robbed. According to the scriptures, to still be in God's service with such children, had to go to jail, had to go to the police to collect his sons. When they came to Christ, they called me. They had literally thrown a bomb where I was preaching. We got in their cars and just fled at the end of the convention. They were bad boys. And I sat there and said, what made you repent? What made you come to Christ like this? They have become so godly, it is unnerving how godly those boys have turned out. They looked at each other for a while, and then with tears one said, it was my father's eyes. He never beat us. We were too big. He never screamed. He never said a word. He just looked at us. Even the police broke down sobbing at our father's godliness and the brokenness. It was my father's eyes that made me unable to live with myself, to sleep. Listen, mother, father, with your prayers and your eyes even. You can make them uncomfortable in their sin and hate themselves till they come to God. But don't give up responsibility. Even as you die, try and say something. Try and say something. And die in faith that your prayers are going to be answered no matter what God has to do. But don't lose responsibility. Don't lose responsibility now. These boys had such a godly father with such a broken heart, not knowing what to do, hopelessness, grief, sorrow. Don't you believe that they didn't affect their father's life? They destroyed him, his ministry. Don't you doubt this now. And his life in the end. It wasn't that the ark was, it was those boys that killed their daddy. That's why Eli died. Don't doubt that. they knew not the Lord. No. Let's look at this mother, this amazing woman of God. She was, don't doubt this, one incredible servant of God in her heart. Here was a woman who, before she was pregnant, vowed to God that if God ever let her have a child, she would give that child to God. No matter what it cost her to serve God, she would give that child everything she could do to fulfill as she'd do, and to care for him, not to neglect him, but to make him serve God with his soul, no matter what sex. She gave him to God. How many godly parents have done that before their children are born? I remember when my darling wife Jenny and I were first married, I was praying one night, and I started to weep, and I tried to stop myself. I literally tried to stop myself praying. I found myself praying as I looked back on my life and my poor mommy and daddy. I started praying, God, don't let us have children. Please, God. I'm begging you in Jesus Christ's name, don't let us have children. If they are going to serve the devil and go to hell and put us through hell, please don't let us ever have children. And as I was praying this, I started to weep because I was scared of what I prayed and fearful and sorry that I prayed it, but I prayed it. And as I had my Bible open, which is my custom, when I pray as much as I can to have the Bible open, my tears fell on this verse. Not expecting anything, I tried to wipe away the tears off this rice paper. And I wiped the tear off this verse. All thy children shall follow me. All thy children shall follow me, and their righteousness shall be of me. Great shall be the peace of thy children. And that followed as I thought, no, verse after verse, that I have stood with my children again and again and said, listen carefully now, this is what God said to me before your mommy ever fell pregnant to bring you into this world. When I wept, and I told them, I tell my children again and again what God said to me. How many godly mothers and fathers did what Hannah did, have committed their children to God before their birth to serve God, agonizing, meaning it from their hearts. They'll give them to God. They'll do everything they can to make those children follow God. And no matter what sacrifices it involves, they make to fulfill what they vowed to God before the pregnancy even, and the hope of it. Yes. But now I want to look at Samuel. Samuel had a mother that gave him to the Lord, that fulfilled every part and condition she knew in her conscience she had to do now. That God had answered her prayer. She knew why God had answered her prayer, because of what she prayed, and she wanted it. It wasn't easy for her, but she wanted it. Now, having a mother like that, being taken by the mother to serve God in God's service as best as she can, doing everything. We read these staggering words, but Samuel did not yet know the Lord. You see, it wasn't only Eli's children, they knew not the Lord. Samuel knew not the Lord. That mother. You see, he was not filthy, he was not depraved, he was a good boy, but he wasn't saved. He didn't know God and truth. Let me warn everyone, whoever hears this message, don't dare believe you're safe just because you had a mother who gave you to God and is doing everything she can to fulfill her promise to God or a father. You see, there's a great danger in being young with godly parents who pray for you, but you do not know God. What's the danger? You see, when you're saved, there's an incredible protection. Young child, young boy, young girl, that the devil won't be able to make you filthy if you do what God has said. Soak yourself in the scriptures that you may grow and be renewed day by day in the inner man. Be careful here, because if you're not saved and you keep putting it off, though you're not a bad boy like Hophni and Phinehas, wicked, you haven't broken your mother, you don't defy them, there's a terrible danger. We have a terrible enemy. And he can bring circumstances and one person into your life that can rob you of purity, rob you of decency. And once you taste that which is of the devil, that's evil, you have to fight against it for the rest of your life. Unto the pure, all things are pure. They don't know the temptations. But when you've tasted all these things, you have to come to God for enormous grace. Because you know when you're in circumstance, you know when you stand with a person, you know what's in a girl's eyes, what's in a boy's eyes. You know what that apple, you know what that fruit contains. You know where to find. You've got to seek God for grace now. Be careful. Don't put it off. I met a preacher in America. He said to me, and you probably all know his name, I don't suppose you mate. He's very loved. He said to me, when I was a young man, I would be brought up in conferences and conventions and under the great ministry of God's word from some of the greatest preachers in the world. And then he said these, but you know, I just put it off. I wasn't a bad boy. I just kept there putting it off. And it lost its impact. One night I sat there sitting under one of the greatest preachers in the world, and I was so shocked. Because it was like dead. There was nothing gripping me. Nothing enthralled me. Nothing. It was just like dead. And I got so frightened. I didn't listen to the rest of the message. I just became so scared. I got to my bedroom. I got in my face. I started weeping. God, have you sealed my choice? I just kept putting it off. Please don't seal my choice. I forgive me. I sought God weeping through the night until God saved my soul. In fear that God had sealed my choice, I sought God with such desperation as few have ever been so desperate and so fearful as they sought God's salvation, as I did that night. Be careful here, young people. Be careful here. Be careful. It wasn't only Hophni and Phinehas in danger, not knowing the Lord. It's you. In this wicked world, do you honestly think the devil won't get you if you're not saved? And defile you and shame your godly parents. Can we stand, please?